Hello and welcome back to Master Meteorology. Today we're going to be talking about the top 5 questions about the atmosphere. Before we get into that, I will say I make forecast videos every single morning, as well as videos like this. So if you enjoy following the weather, you can subscribe to my channel. Alright, the first question, what is the atmosphere and what is it made of? Well, the atmosphere is basically a collection of gases that extends out many thousands of miles, and it gets thinner as you go up. The reason it gets thinner is the atmosphere is held to the Earth by the Earth's gravitational pull. So closer to the Earth, the gravitational pull is going to be stronger, so the atmosphere is thicker closer to the surface. Now, what does the atmosphere do? It holds the air we breathe, it holds moisture, that's how we get clouds, and it also protects us from space. By that I mean, if a meteor is coming in, it's most likely that it's going to actually burn up in the atmosphere as it hits a bunch of particles and heats up. And it also protects us from the sun's harmful rays. The sun has some pretty bad radiation where if we didn't have an atmosphere protecting us, that radiation would hit us and we would not be able to live here. So the atmosphere, to sum up, is basically the protective bubble in which we live. And what is it made of? Now, this is a question that people typically get wrong when asked, what is the atmosphere made of? Majority of people think it's pretty much just oxygen. And as it turns out, it's actually made up of 4 different gases that make up about 99.9% of the atmosphere. There's a bunch of gases that have maybe like a few parts per million, but the 4 major ones are nitrogen, oxygen, argon, and carbon dioxide. Now, the question people usually get wrong is they think it's mostly oxygen, and it turns out it's mostly nitrogen. In fact, nitrogen makes up about 78% of the Earth's atmosphere. And what does nitrogen really do? Well, for the most part, it doesn't really do that much. Living things do need it to make proteins, but really the major thing it does is it dilutes the amount of oxygen that's in the atmosphere. If our atmosphere wasn't 78% nitrogen, let's say it was 78% oxygen, and a fire started, that fire would probably just burn forever because fires need oxygen. And that's what oxygen does in the atmosphere. It allows fires to burn, but it's also required for respiration for most animals, including you and me. We take in oxygen and then we put back out carbon dioxide. So oxygen is the one that gets the most press, we'll say it that way, but it's because it's what we need to survive. Now, oxygen, we breathe it in, then we breathe out carbon dioxide, but the opposite is true for plants. They take in carbon dioxide and then they put out oxygen. So it's kind of a little cycle. We take in oxygen, put out carbon dioxide. Plants take in carbon dioxide and put out oxygen. It's what you would call symbiosis in science. So that's what carbon dioxide does. Plants take it in, spit out oxygen. It also acts as the protective blanket around our atmosphere. You've probably heard of the greenhouse effect before. And basically what it is the sun, you probably know this, radiation comes in from the sun, hits Earth's surface and warms up our surface. Now, that radiation then wants to just escape back into space. So without carbon dioxide, that radiation would just escape back into space. What carbon dioxide does is it almost acts as a blanket. As that radiation's going out, the carbon dioxide absorbs it and then heats up the rest of the atmosphere with that radiation that should have escaped. So if you've ever heard of the greenhouse effect before, that's basically it. Instead of radiation just going out into space, carbon dioxide traps it, keeps us a lot warmer, and really makes this planet livable as long as it doesn't get too out of control. Bonus question, what about water vapor? So I don't know if I said this, but the atmosphere is 78% nitrogen, 21% oxygen, 1% argon, and about 0.03% carbon dioxide. That's the percentage of the 4 major gases that make up about 99.9% of the Earth's atmosphere. But that's a dry atmosphere. When there's water vapor, that is going to take up some of those percentages. And let's say the desert or some really dry place, there might not be any water vapor in the atmosphere. It might be 0%. And then it's all those percentages I just said for the other gases. 78% nitrogen, 21 oxygen, 1 argon, 0.03 carbon dioxide. But in a very moist place, like you always hear of how humid Florida is, that could be up to maybe 4% water vapor. And that's just going to take down all the other percentages. I think nitrogen goes down to about 75%, oxygen maybe down to 20%. And then when you have a ton of water vapor, that could lead to a bunch of clouds, which could lead to a bunch of thunderstorms, severe weather. If it's really cold, it could lead to some snow. So water vapor is really the thing we look at in meteorology when determining how strong a storm's going to be. If a low pressure could be moving in, but if there's no water vapor present in the area, probably not going to drop all that much rain. So it's something interesting to look out for. And that pretty much sums up the atmosphere. Those are the first 5 questions. I'm going to do another one going into the layers of the atmosphere. For example, troposphere up to thermosphere. So if you want to see that video, you can stay tuned. And thanks for watching.